2024. Now, the Kenya Revenue Authority collected 2.4 trillion shillings in revenue in the financial year ended June 2024, translating to a growth of about 11% compared to the previous financial year. But this was still a missed target, with the revenue target collection being 2.5 trillion shillings after the supplementary budget revised it downwards from 2.7 trillion shillings. So KRA missed its target for the 2023-2024 financial year by about 130 billion shillings. In the current financial year, the revenue target stood at about 2.9 trillion shillings, meant to be collected through measures contained in the Finance Bill of 2024, which has since been withdrawn. This has put Kenya in a very difficult position, with the global rating agency Moody recently downgrading Kenya's credit rating and painting a bleak picture of the country's economic status in terms of fulfilling its debt obligations. And in studio with us as we delve deep into this headache is Dr. Maina Kamau, who is an economist. We also have economist Ruth Kinyanjui, as well as Embakasi North Member of Parliament Honorable James Gakuya, who is also the chair of the Trade Committee of the National Assembly. Lady and gentlemen, good morning, and many thanks for being with us. I'd like to begin with you, Ruth. What are your thoughts on that recent downgrading of Kenya's credit rating by global rating agency Moody, and what does it mean? Why should the country be concerned about it?
Thank you so much. Actually, at this point, I don't look at it like it should be a really concern, because whether it's being downgraded, we are dealing with our own issues, which are actually real issues. Michelle, considering that the finance bill did not go through or will not go through, meaning that the revenue, the avenues that the government thought are going to bring on board more revenue, that's not going to be happening. And as we can see the political climate, one of the things that causes actually a downgrade is the political climate, the political instability, or the viewed political instability, and the fact that maybe most of the negotiated issues, especially areas that maybe people like the World Bank, the IFC had estimated or had given Kenya a leeway, that is not going to be happening. If you look at the finance bill, a lot of issues are going to take long before they resolve, because the whole of it was rejected. There was no amendment, it was a whole reject. So meaning this year, nothing is going to increase from a revenue perspective. There's no going to be increase. And that will affect even the loans that maybe we expected, the development loans that we expected to have received as a country. And how then, why is Moody's then coming back and thinking that maybe Kenyan has to go down? Because everyone foresees in the next 3 years, there's not going to be much revenue increase in the country. And the president right now is really balancing the act of the economy and also the political goodwill for his end of term. So all those are win-win, and he has to balance. And it does not matter how that is going to affect other landscapes. And even as a country, we expect that to happen, because there's not going to be much revenue push even from other outside international agencies. So we are first going to live within our means right now. We are going to have missed targets, and we are going to operate in something called maybe, we are going to be at a constant, it's going to be ceteris paribus, very constant for the next 3 years.
Dr. Kamau, the taxman missed the revenue target by about 107 billion shillings in the 2022-2023 financial year. And then in the 2023-2024 financial year, they missed the target by about 130 billion shillings. Some say it's not so much a miss when you look at it. They're talking about 95% performance rate against the target itself. But it's been consistent that the KRA misses its revenue targets. How much worse now, or how much better, will we ask, with a target of 2.9 trillion shillings and a withdrawn finance bill?
Actually, this year, KRA missed the target by the highest margin. It is actually 267 billion. Because there's what we call ordinary revenue.
Right.
And what you are reading about 2.4 trillion is what KRA collected, ordinary revenue plus other revenues that it collects on behalf of other agencies, like housing levy, something like NITA, something like stamp duty, all that. So actually, KRA has missed the revenue targets by 267 billion. It is the highest. And that comes on the backdrop of the fact that we had actually raised the tax rates. And this actually justifies the fact that the more tax rates, the higher you raise the tax rates, the reduced the tax revenue at the end of the day. So it is a worrying trend that KRA has consistently been missing their targets, is because instead of being realistic, instead of setting realistic targets, they are always over-ambitious. For instance, if this year we have collected about 2.2 trillion by the information that was released by KRA, 2.4 is now including other taxes, other revenues that KRA was collecting on behalf of other agencies. But ordinary revenue is about 2.2 trillion. And we see the Ruto's government wanting to push the ordinary revenue collection from 2.2 to 2.9 trillion. Actually, an increase of 800 billion. I would want to remind you, Michelle, when Kibaki government took over in 2002, the revenue collection by the Moi administration, or where he picked, the revenue collection was 250 billion. Revenue collection, the last budget by the Moi's administration. Right. It took Kibaki 10 years for him to to be able to mobilize revenue to almost 1 trillion. By the time he was leaving office, he was able to mobilize 950 billion per year. And this is what now Ruto's government wants to really achieve within a period of 1 year. Because now he's saying that I want to move from 2.2 trillion to 2.9 trillion within 1 year. It is impossible. It took Kibaki's government 10 years to be able to move from 250 billion to 1 trillion, an extra 1 trillion. So basically, I foresee a very negative situation, because with the downgrading of the credit rating of Kenya by the Moody, what we are seeing is now that the foreign investors have started to dump the Eurobond. And why are they doing that? Because they are now aware or alive to the fact that Kenya is struggling to mobilize for revenue. And they were banking on the ability of Kenya to collect more revenues, right, so that their debt could be repaid. But that one may not be forthcoming. Okay. So they want to really drop and cash in. And by doing that, we are having an oversupply of Eurobond, but no one wants to buy this Eurobond. And therefore, whenever we have oversupply of anything and no demand for it, then the prices go down. Right.
Honorable Gakuya, you are the chair of the Trade Committee of the National Assembly. Now, the Kenya Revenue Authority says factors that affected revenue, and we've had this before, mainly included external factors: depreciation of the Kenyan shilling, rising bank lending rates, and international conflicts. And as Dr. Kamau says, much of that revenue where KRA collects on behalf of other government agencies is mainly at the ports of entry. And this is like the road maintenance levy, things like the air passenger service charge. But we also have the numbers for revenue collection for the 2023-2024 financial year. And KRA shows that domestic VAT collections stood at 314 billion against a target of 307 billion. So this was actually a growth of about 15% compared to last year. Let's begin there, because this is part of the, highlights of the revenues for the last financial year. What would you attribute this rise in domestic VAT collection to?
One, Michelle, let me say overall revenue collection, I would give KLA a big plus. And I would say that, in fact, they have done well their job. Performing and collecting the magnitude of equivalent to, in total of 2.47 trillion, that is a big plus to me. Comparing that, actually, the last 2023-24 financial year budget was triggering to 3.8 there. I would say the projections were the domestic collection of 2.787 trillion Kenya shillings, but during the supplementary, as you have alluded to, there was a downside of 250 billion out of it. And I would say missing a target of 130 at the end of the financial year. That was not a very bad show. But to me, the only question I have is that having collected all this much, and equivalently, we must have borrowed because we had a deficit which was based on internal and external borrowing.
Right.
Michelo, we have performed very poorly at the end of this financial year. Because you realize that, in fact, most of the budgets that we allocated to our institutions, especially the growth sectors like EPZ, issues to do with the county aggregation centers, issues to do with the COVID sector, with the cherry fund, and many other areas. We only have figures, but we don't have disbursement. So you ask your question. EPZ, we allocated 5 billion Kenya shillings to that sector. It has only, at the close of the financial year, received 1 billion only. The projects have started, flagship projects like Busia, Moranga, Kirinyaga, and elsewhere have commenced. What do you think that actually we are going to take this particular project? Because I am foreseeing a situation where if we have failed to finance those projects, and actually we have not performed abundantly in that closing financial year, how are we going to perform going forward with this kind of now scenario we are in? It is then we are going to have a double tragedy in this. And you are finding not only a single area which is affected. Even in the charity, last financial year we budgeted 4 billion Kenya shillings to charity fund, to top up. That charity fund, they have already received less than a billion. The rest is deficit. Where are we going to get that deficit from? We have closed the year. We have managed to disseminate that money to charity fund. It tells you we have only the figures, but we are not having actual dissemination of those funds to the actual sectors. Therefore, it gives me a big question. If we have not achieved to finance those sectors at the close of the year, and we didn't have those serious effects, what about now? We are now in this other tragedy. How are we going to perform them?
Okay.
Then I'm finding a very serious hole ahead of us. Okay. Which, at the end of the day, if we are not serious, the country will collapse. And
we'll be discussing then the grave implications, especially from the grassroots level. But Ruth, when Moody downgraded Kenya's credit rating, it gave several reasons. And one was that it predicted, significantly diminished capacity to implement revenue-based fiscal consolidation that would improve debt affordability. That is one. Two, the ratings agency doesn't expect the Kenyan government to be able to introduce significant revenue-raising measures in the foreseeable future. So that's where we are now. Many say the president is between a rock and a hard place. But so what options are there? Because Kenyans still have a country to run, a country and a budget that needs to be financed. What options are there now for the country to significantly raise revenue in light of the withdrawal of the finance bill?
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'll build up from where Mheshimiwa is coming from. First, we cannot say that a small variance or a big variance is a small variance to the country, and especially when we say to a tune of 130 billion, and especially if it's something that has been consistently happening, then it needs to be resolved. What are the issues? Because we cannot be budgeting and saying that we're going to meet these targets, or KRA is going to meet this target. Then we look so bad as a country, even the KRA as an institution, it looks like a joker in the implementation of fiscal policies. And this is where our issues are as a country and as Kenyans. Why? Because we look at things and we can easily downplay them. You see, but institutions should not be downplayed, especially when it comes to the country, because if that revenue, based on all the assumptions that had been put down, had been foreseen to come through and it did not, then it needs to be resolved. Why didn't that happen? Then that way, the government will be able to understand what's the problem with the sector, like which sector did not deliver and why. Is it initiative? Is it development? what needs to be done so that that sector can deliver and can be able to bring on board the taxes that had been projected? Or are we saying from a treasury perspective, Michelle, that we have been budgeting from a wrong footage? You know, it just shows there is a disconnect somewhere between the budgeting people and the collection issues. It shows there is an issue with implementation of the ways that we have put down in place to bring on to onboard more revenue, and that's the main issue. Why am I saying that, Michelle? Even with the absence of Finance Bill 2024, meaning that the government still has the open tax band that still is going to bring on revenue, and there's still a maximization. There are still gaps that can be filled and bring in a maximization even without really implementation of the current finance bill. There are still ways, but is the government ready to deep dive in terms of ensuring that is done? And that is what was the biggest thing that the president has. And I can tell you, for example, when I see the sponsor of this bill for the Finance Bill 2024, say Mheshimiwa Kimani, I can ask from where I'm sitting right now as an economist and say, what advice did he give the president in terms of what can and what cannot, so that then we do not get to where we are right now? Because the stalemate right now, Michelle, I can tell you, for the next 3-4 years, we are going to be where we are, and that's why we are seeing implications that like the downgrade, because we do not expect a lot of income. However, we still have the existing loops that can be efficiently collected. For example, that budget by a carrier of 2.9 billion, it can be met by it efficiently, following up on the issues that did not happen. Actually, it's a good opportunity for the government right now to go back to things that did not happen in previous years, because we've never seen this happen previously. It's a good opportunity for them to go back to the previous year, what did not happen, what they never investigated, and start bringing on board efficiency.
Right, and this is a conversation where we're at now, because Kenyans now want not really just an audit of the debt, but an audit of the previous revenue-raising measures over the last few years to see what worked and what didn't. Dr. Kamau, then just to build up from that, because like I mentioned, from this last financial year, domestic VAT collections crossed the 300 billion shilling mark, and this has largely been attributed to the rollout of the e-team system. And so some say then this is working, so maybe we can consider keeping this. And so let's look at what's not working and consider scrapping that. What opportunity does the country and indeed the government have now in setting things right with regard to the challenges of revenue mobilization?
The issue of e-teams is a plus. Actually, it has made KRA to be able to collect more VAT. But if I can just respond to the issue that was raised by my colleague, that KRA is performing well, I don't think it is, because you know, the National Assembly had actually passed the initial budget. The initial target was 2.7 trillion. Right. They revised it down up to 2.4 trillion. And KRA was still not able to collect that because it collected 2.2 in ordinary revenue. So they missed budget by about 500 billion. I don't know why we can say that is an impressive performance. And to make the issue worse, the matter worse, is actually now we are proposing that we collect 2.9 trillion. And I think the National Assembly is failing the country in a big way because they are misleading the executive. And they are the ones, if the executive come up with a proposal, it is the National Assembly that is supposed to say this is unrealistic. If we are not be able to meet a target of 2.4 trillion, which was originally 2.7, which business do we have to push it to 2.9?
Right. The figures also show the exchequer collection, and you know, and Honorable Gakuya, this may be to you. The exchequer collection closed at about 2.2 trillion shillings, and this was up 9.5%. And exchequer collection is basically revenues constituting all mainstream government revenues, so taxes on international trade and transactions, excise taxes, taxes on income, profits and capital gains, all of that. This seems to have recorded better performance. Talk to us about that, Honorable Gakuya, and then whether the country is setting it, and how the country is setting its sights on increasing exchequer collections.
One Michelle, let me say, if you look to the trajectories of all the sectors that the KRA are dependent on, including export, the duties that they normally collect at the entry point of our entry points, VATs, and all those other various areas that actually they are dependent, because there are like 7 number of pillars that of correction areas. You realize none of it has not performed well. Generally, they have increased on all those sectors of correction of revenue. The only problem is between the treasury trajectories and now the actual implementation. Probably what we are doing is that we are giving a lot of pressure to the KRA with targets that are not manageable. And this is where we should draw the line. Because as this kind of estimates of correction, because they are always estimates, they are never actual. Having various of over 200, over 300, and because 250 plus one that it gives you 380. That kind of vacuum is too big, and there has to be a conversation between the Treasury, the Finance Committee, and the KRA, because one of them has to belong. And if that particular deficit is appearing by the failure of the KRA to achieve the target, then they should tell why. And why have you not attained the match that we expected? Why in this particular sector have you not performed to attain? Because it tells you what, Michelle, it tells you this particular vacuum of 380 billion will now either force cuts or borrowing. Because you either borrow to fill the gaps, or either you cut. And when you go cut, most of the time you realize that the cuts are taken to development. And that is how we realized what we call a white elephant project. In this case, I am telling you, it is going to be so led that you have these county aggregation centers. They have picked, some of them at the stage of 22%, 25%. But assume no disbursement is coming from the national government, because the national government was to raise funds which were equivalent to the county. The county has raised their money. The national government has only raised less than $1 billion, and the year has closed. Then what are the expectations of the result of those projects? Those projects, either they are going to stop at the middle, because either counties has to budget more and pop to their project to finish, or else the government has to do something extraordinary. Because as of now, the year has closed. And that kind of disbursements has not seen the light of the day. And it tells you, what are you going to do with these gaps? For us to be serious planners in our budget, we need to make sure that, in fact, if we lower projects, we have to find a way of financing the project to the completion. Failure to that is a waste of resources. And I can tell you, at the end of the day, we will leave that project aside. You prioritize another project next financial year. Then it is done halfway. Another financial year, another done halfway. Then the country is moving nowhere. All
right. Let's take a break here on New Dawn. We'll be discussing this revenue mobilization headache in a bit more detail when we come back. Even as the Standard newspaper reports that the Auditor General has raised the flag of missing billions at the Kenya Revenue Authority. Corruption remains one of those loopholes that can avail a lot of funds to the country through revenue mobilization. We'll be discussing that after the break. Do stay with us.